I'm reading from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi-lila, chapter 1, which is entitled The Spiritual Masters, and this is text number 47. Shiksha Guru Ke Tajani Krishnera Srup Antaryami Bhakta Shrestha Edui Rup. One should know the instructing spiritual master to be the personality of God, of Krishna. Lord Krishna manifests himself as the super soul and as the greatest devotee of the Lord. Well, let's begin by offering our obeisances to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasakadyade Siddharane. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami states that the instructing spiritual master is a bona fide representative of Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna himself teaches us as the instructing spiritual master from within and without. Within he teaches as Paramatma, our constant companion, and from without he teaches from the Bhagavad Gita as the instructing spiritual master. There are two kinds of instructing spiritual masters. One is the liberated person, fully absorbed in meditation and devotional service, and the other is he who invokes the disciple's spiritual consciousness by means of relevant instructions. Thus, the instructions in the science of devotion are differentiated in terms of the objective and subjective ways of understanding. The Acharya, in the true sense of the term, was authorized to deliver Krishna, enriches the disciple with full spiritual knowledge, and thus awakens him to the activities of devotional service. When learning from the self-realized spiritual master, one actually engages himself in the service of Lord Vishnu, functional devotional service begins. The procedures of this devotional service are known as abhideya, or actions one is duty-bound to perform. Our only shelter is the Supreme Lord, and one who teaches how to approach Krishna is a functioning form of the personality of Godhead. There is no difference between the shelter-giving Supreme Lord and the initiating and instructing spiritual masters. One foolishly discriminates between them, he commits an offense in the discharge of devotional service. Sanatana Goswami is the ideal spiritual master, where he delivers one the shelter of the lotus feet of Madan Mohan. Even though one may be unable to travel on the field of Vrindavan due to forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he can get an adequate opportunity to stay in Vrindavan and derive all spiritual benefits by the mercy of Sanatana Goswami. Shri Govindaji acts exactly like the Shiksha Guru, instructing spiritual master by teaching Arjuna the Bhagavad Gita. He's the original preceptor. He gives us instructions and opportunity to serve him. The initiating spiritual master is a personal manifestation of Srila Madan Mohan Vigraha, whereas the instructing spiritual master is the personal representative of Srila Govindadev Vigraha. Both these deities are worshipped in Vrindavan. Srila Gopinath is the ultimate attraction in spiritual realization. So the verse again. Shiksha Guru Ke Tajani Krishnera Srup Antaryami Bhakta Shrestha Edu Rup. One should know that instructing spiritual master be the personality of Krishna. Lord Krishna manifests himself as the super soul and as the greatest devotee of the Lord. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasakadyade Siddharane. This is a topic that sometimes it's spoken about in ISKCON, but usually not. What is the Diksha Guru and what is the Shiksha Guru, and what are the relationships between them? In the previous verse, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has stated, quoting from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Acharyamam Vijaniyam Navam Martita Karhichit. Na Martya Budya Suyeta Sarva Deva Mayo Guru. One should know the Acharya is myself and never disrespect him in any way. One should not envy him, thinking him an ordinary man, for he is a representative of all the demigods. And in Srila Prabhupada's purport, he describes different kinds of acharyas. One from the Srimad Bhagavatam, where Lord Krishna is speaking to Uddhava and describing how the spiritual master, called the acharya, teaches their students Vedic knowledge with all its intricacies and gives them their second birth, known as Upaniti. And then we have another idea of acharya at the end, which is coming from our acharyas and our disciple succession, that in his prayers to the spiritual master, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur confirms that all the revealed scriptures accept the spiritual master to be identical to the personality of Godhead, because he is very dear and confidential servant to the Lord. Gaudiya Vaishnavas therefore worship Srila Gurudev, the spiritual master, in the light of his being the servitor of the personality of Godhead. In all the ancient literatures of devotional service, and in the recent songs of Srila Narottam Das Thakur, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and other unalloyed Vaishnavas, the spiritual master is always considered either one of the confidential associates of Srimati Radharani or a manifested representative of Srila Nityananda Prabhu. So these are both very exalted positions. Now, as Prabhupada explains here, that in the next verse, that there are two different types of Shiksha Gurus. And of course, the Shiksha Guru is actually a representative of the Super Soul. In fact, she's speaking, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Savasya chaham ridi sanivishto mataksmitir jnanam aponam cha vedaischa savaraham eva vedyo vedanta krit vedavid eva chaham. That I am situated in everyone's heart, and from me comes remembrance, comes knowledge, and comes forgetfulness. So that's true for all living entities. Krishna in everyone's heart is supplying knowledge to everyone. And he's also helping us forget. If we didn't forget, and we remembered our previous lifetimes, like sometimes it is found that the child within the womb, according to the Bhagavatam, sometimes remembers 100 previous births. So that might be a little embarrassing for us if we remembered all our previous births. Now, most of us probably weren't kings or queens in our last lifetime. We may have been something else. Now, if I remembered I was a king or queen, I'd lament. And if I remembered I was a frog, I'd be embarrassed. So therefore, Krishna, by his mercy, doesn't allow us to remember all our previous lifetimes, because it would be very embarrassing or very disconcerting to find out what we were in previously. Similarly, for those who are trying to remember Krishna, Krishna helps us forget Maya. And for those who are trying to forget Krishna, then Krishna helps one forget Krishna. and remember everything else except for Krishna. Therefore, the conclusion is that whatever we can remember is coming from, ultimately, we're depending on Krishna for it, either for our remembrance or our knowledge or our forgetfulness. So if we're repeating Krishna's message in Bhagavad Gita, coming through the super succession, anyone who's doing that is representing the super soul. Now, as it says in this particular verse, not the super soul has not given everyone complete realization of the truth. One may have partial understanding of the truth based upon Krishna's revelation, as he says, the Dhammi, Buddhi Yogam Tam. Anyone who tries to be steady in devotional service and acts with enthusiasm in devotional service, then Krishna gives intelligence by which one can gradually make progress. So anyone who's engaged in devotional service, according to their steadiness and according to their enthusiasm, then Krishna is supplying knowledge, supplying remembrance, and realizations about what is the science of Krishna consciousness. But as Prabhupada explains, that not everyone who's repeating Krishna's message is equally on the transcendental platform. There are those who are actually fully conscious of Krishna, and whatever they're explaining is because they're actually situated in that realm of Goloka Vrindavan. They're actually living, even in this world, in the spiritual world. Internally, they may be remembering the pastimes of Radha and Krishna and their associates, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates. And externally, they're acting to spread Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission in this world perfectly, as a perfect instrument for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But not everyone is going to be on that platform. And therefore, one has to be able to differentiate between those who are actually on the transcendental platform, and whatever they do and whatever they say is perfectly in harmony with Krishna's desire. Nimitra matram bhavasava chin. Krishna says to Arjuna, just become an instrument. As I explained previously, as Prabhupada wrote in the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, that one lady was asking Srila Prabhupada, can you recommend to me an edition of the Bhagavad Gita in English? And Srila Prabhupada said, unfortunately, I can't do that, because although there are more than 700 commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita, but in every one of those commentaries, the author has given his own opinion about what the meaning of the Bhagavad Gita is. And then Prabhupada said, if we want to take a medicine, we have to take it according to the label on the medicine, or according to the direction of the expert physician. We can't take it whimsically according to our own idea. So similarly, if we want to get some advantage, we want to get some help from the Bhagavad Gita, we want to take shelter of the Bhagavad Gita, the instructions, we have to accept Bhagavad Gita as Krishna spoke it. Now, according to many authorities, such as Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Sankaracharya, even Sankaracharya, they all proclaim that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Similarly, in the Brahma Samhita and in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that it is also stated that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, at least theoretically, we should accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and try to act in a relationship with him, because every one of us has an eternal relation with Krishna, And that relationship is called Svarup. And the perfection of our devotional service is called Svarup Siddhi, or when our relationship, eternal relationship, in one of 5 rasas is revealed to us. But in order to do that, in order to Krishna to supply us with that realization, that revelation, we have to at least act on faith. So that faith begins with accepting, at least theoretically, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That Prabhupada says is called submission. Anyone under the spell or influence of Maya cannot fully experience Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And as long as we're not fully in Krishna consciousness, there's always going to be some doubt about who Krishna is and who we are, etc. But at least theoretically, we have to accept that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And along with that, in order to understand Krishna more clearly, we should at least theoretically accept that Srila Prabhupada is a perfect devotee of Krishna. Now, as we cannot see the opulence of Krishna, because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is considered supreme because he has all opulence in full. As a great devotee has explained, Aishvaryasya samagrasya viryasya yashashastriyaha Jnana vairagyas chaiva shanam bhagavatingana. That the qualification of God is he has 6 opulences in full, namely full beauty, full knowledge, full strength, full fame, full renunciation, and full strength, full wealth. Now we can't see of Krishna how strong he is. We're not personally present to see him lift Govardhan Hill at this particular time, nor do we see how he's moving planets in their orbits. Although we can understand someone very powerful must be doing it, still we don't know exactly who's doing it. Similarly, we don't know how wealthy Krishna is. He may give us a little bit of Lakshmi sometimes, but he doesn't give us all the Lakshmi. Similarly, we don't know how famous Krishna is or how renounced he is, but in spite of that, we can understand if Krishna is full of knowledge. That's why we take shelter of Krishna's instructions and Prabhupada's instructions too. If we take shelter of Krishna's instructions, such as Denosminita dehe komaram yovanam jara, Tatada hantara praptira diryas tatra namuyate. Such instructions, as the fact that our body is changing, but we're not changing, is a method by which Krishna helps us use our intelligence to see things properly. That as we hear Krishna explain that our bodies are changing, but we ourselves, the soul who is conscious of this body, conscious of the subtle mind, is not changing. Krishna uses our intelligence to discover our eternality. Similarly, if we go through the Bhagavad Gita and we listen attentively and try to assimilate the knowledge, then we can see whether or not Krishna's knowledge is perfect or not. Now, to help us do that, Srila Prabhupada has given us his purports in order to help explain Krishna's instructions so that we can more easily assimilate them and accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So similarly, we have to at least theoretically accept that Prabhupada is a perfect devotee and see if his knowledge is also perfect. If the aim of the Bhagavad Gita, as Krishna says, is yomam evam asamudo janati purushottama sasarvavit bhajante mam sarvabhavena bharata. That anyone who knows me is the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting is said to be the knower of everything. and therefore he engages himself in full devotional service. Iti guyatama shastram idam yuktva mayanaga etam bhutva buddhimatsat krita kritas varata. That this is the most confidential part of all the Vedic wisdom, that anyone who knows this will become wise, and his endeavors will know perfection. So we can examine Srila Prabhupada's purports and see if he's, at every purport, he's directing us towards either devotional service to Krishna or becoming conscious of Krishna. If he's completely fixed in that particular service to his spiritual master, then we can understand that Prabhupada is a perfect devotee of Krishna. And that, at least theoretically, we should read his purports with the understanding that they will help us understanding Krishna's instructions. And if we understand Krishna's instructions and put them into practice, then we can expect that Krishna will help us, bring us to a higher and higher levels of Krishna consciousness and engagement in pure devotional service. Now, as it says here also, others may also help us on this path. We also may have a Diksha Guru. The Diksha Guru is known as the Ashraya, the shelter. That's necessary for the disciple because one has to develop a service attitude. Everything depends upon service attitude. Exactly what service we render is secondary. It's the attitude of service that's most pleasing to Krishna. How steadily we're rendering that service and with how much enthusiasm. Of course, the service should also be bona fide, coming in disciple succession from Krishna. And Krishna will reciprocate according to our sincere desire to serve him. Sincere desire is manifested by our steadiness in our sadhana and our enthusiasm, not only in sadhana, but also in preaching. There are symptoms of bhava that explain those two things. That the first one is that one is always engaged in devotional service. And then there's others, samuktena, and how the devotee believes that he'll attain Krishna, he has faith in Krishna, he has attraction for chanting the holy name, living in a holy place, he's meek and he's humble, etc. Bhakti Pareshanu Vyaktir Anyata Trika Ekakala. So there are symptoms of pure devotion, all based upon steady devotional service and enthusiastic devotional service. Then Krishna will help us. So anyone who can help us, anyone who inspires us to become more steady in devotional service and more enthusiastic in service to Krishna and Krishna's devotees, then they can be taken as a kind of guru, shiksha guru. As I explained before, according to Srila Rupa Goswami, our devotional service is nourished by the loving exchanges with Krishna and his devotees, namely 6 loving exchanges. Dadati pratigrinakti kuyam akiti pritsiti unde bojayate chaiva shadvidam priti lakshana. Offering gifts in charity and accepting charitable gifts, revealing one's mind in confidence and inquiring confidentially, offering prasad and accepting prasad. These are 6 symptoms of love exchanged between one devotee and another. So our devotional service is simply based upon trying to serve Krishna without material motivation, try to serve the devotees and cooperate with them for the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is basically Yari Deka, Tarikaha, Krishna, Upadesh, Amara, Agai, Guruhana, Taridesh. That whoever we meet, which means anyone, any living entity we meet, we should try to help them become Krishna conscious. And that way, we act as a guru. Guru doesn't necessarily mean you have to sit on a big seat and give people names. Guru means, real guru is one who actually is sincerely trying to help others become Krishna conscious according to the intelligence that Krishna is supplying to. One, Krishna wants to give us intelligence by which we can go back to the spiritual world, be engaged in devotional service, and also to give others the inspiration and the intelligence, the knowledge by which they can also, from whatever position they're at, make some progress towards going back to Krishna. So that takes some transcendental expertise and discrimination. So love is a basic principle, loving exchanges, but they'll have to be, as Srila Rupa Goswami has explained, they should be done or exchanged appropriately. In the next verse, he says, Krishneti yasya giritam manasedriyeta dikshasti tat pranitibis chabhajantam isham shushu shaya chabhajanam ananya anya indati sunya hridayam ipsita sangalabdya. One should honor the devotee who chants the holy name. One should cooperate with those devotees who are engaged in, who are initiated and engaged in serving the deity. And one should faithfully serve that unalloyed devotee who's advanced in undeviated devotional service and whose heart is devoid of the propensity to criticize others. So, this is what we're supposed to be learning. We have no other business in Krishna consciousness other than to learn how to exchange service or love with Krishna and his devotees. But we have to have some discrimination, at least, beginning with understanding that everyone is Krishna's servant. We may be in some body, in fact, looking around, we're all in different bodies. And every body is composed of the three modes of material nature, unless we have a transcendental body. Now, considering that even if we had a transcendental body, it's still we have different bodies. And every body is meant for service to Krishna. Now, when we're serving Krishna with this body, under the directions of Krishna's representatives, such as we're serving the teachings of Srila Rupa Goswami, then the result is that we're making progress towards Krishna and love for Krishna and love for everyone in relation to Krishna. Therefore, it doesn't matter any body that we have, the important element is somehow or another to engage it in Krishna's service with steadiness and enthusiasm. Even we find those in less than human form of life, such as Gajendra, he reached perfection, although he was in the body of an elephant. Hanuman, although he was in the body of a varna or a monkey, he was also perfect because he completely engaged himself in devotional service. So there's no impediment to whatever body we have. There's no obstacle for time, place, or circumstance. Simply, we have to try to engage our bodies, beginning with hearing about Krishna to, as it says here, Madan Mohan is in charge of hearing. And that's called, we have Abhideva Sambandha. And we have Govinda Das Devi, Govinda Dev, as in charge of Abhideya, functional devotional service, practical devotional service, and Gopinath is the goal. Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. So the Ashraya means one who's taken shelter of Madan Mohan. Madan Mohan means Nishoshiti, Nakangshiti, samak sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktin lavate param. One who teaches us by their example of steadiness and devotional service. Steadiness and devotional service means they're not hankering for anything material and not lamenting anything over any loss, material loss. And they see all living entities as Krishna's eternal servants. Therefore, they're engaged in trying to bring others back to Krishna. They have no other purpose for that. So that we have to see, before we take initiation, it's best to see whether this person, his aim is to help me as well as others become Krishna conscious. And that he's not hankering after anything material, nor is he lamenting over any material loss. But he's simply trying to engage himself and others in Krishna's service. Then from such a position, avideya, then he can see what my position is and help me engage in some part of devotional service, either hearing, Shravanam, Kirtana, Vishnu Smarana, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandhanam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. There are 9 processes of pure devotional service, and by Srila Prabhupada's mercy, we have a program, at least for those who live in the temple, or even those who don't live in the temple, they can also have a program. There's no bar to having a program in your home, I hope. Now, in our normal temple program, we get up in the morning and we go to the temple and see the deities. And we chant Hare Krishna, we hear Srimad Bhagavatam in a holy place such as the temple, and we hear and chant together in an attitude of service. So these are 5 powerful processes that Srila Prabhupada has given us, and those who are following them and those who explain to us how to do them nicely, either in the temple or at home, any place, they can help us advance in devotional service. And those who are inspired to participate, who can inspire us to participate in some way to further the spreading of Krishna consciousness, they can also guide and instruct us in how to perform devotional service, abhideya. Now, the initiating guru is supposed to be the ashraya, and also is supposed to be one of the shiksha gurus. So the shiksha guru, basically speaking, teaches us these loving exchanges by their instructions, hopefully, and hopefully by their example, so that we learn how to respect other devotees within our mind, at least. Of course, there are broad categories of innocent devotees. There are the sahajiyas, who don't practice strictly devotional service, and we respect them within our mind, but we don't intimately associate with them. There are others who are innocent, who are not as advanced as we are, and they may be willing to take instruction from us. They may see our example, or they may be listening to us. We have that every day, at least in our temples. Every day someone is giving class, and therefore everyone in the audience is more or less taking a position of receiving shiksha. Even if one is a Mahabhagavat, the words coming from any devotee, sincere devotee, find the process are just like nectar. So it is not that only neophyte devotees or intermediate devotees take instructions. A devotee, when he's very advanced, then he sees everyone as his guru and appreciates everyone's devotional service more than his own devotional service. So everyone should be willing to take instruction, especially from those who are superior, and even those who are simply repeating the message of the superior devotees, ultimately coming from, in our movement, coming from Srila Prabhupada in his books. Now, as Prabhupada writes here, the acharya, in the true sense of the term, who's authorized to deliver Krishna, enriches his disciples with full spiritual knowledge and thus awakens them to the activities of Krishna consciousness, of devotional service. Therefore, we, at least in our movement, we accept that Prabhupada's books fully enrich us, but also Prabhupada's books are manifested in the devotees who are following those books to different degrees. Just like when you put an iron in the fire, then the iron becomes hotter and hotter and hotter until it becomes just like fire, not different from fire. Still, when the iron is in the fire, it's actually becoming hotter. It may not be blazing hot like the fire, but it's different from just an ordinary iron. Similarly, those who can teach us or who are teaching us how to mentally honor other devotees appropriately and how to cooperate with the devotees who are sincerely trying to follow the orders in the simple succession. Those who are trying to practice sadhana and trying to help others, other devotees or innocent people in general, become Krishna conscious, we're supposed to cooperate with them. We learn that, for instance, when we have the good fortune of associating devotees in the temple or in programs or even online, when someone is chanting and we're listening, and then we chant and someone else or others are listening. So this is also exchanging, loving, cooperating with others. There's also cooperation and engaging in devotional service in the society of other devotees. And then those who are like Srila Prabhupada, for us, who have more understanding of how to develop our bhakti by teaching us how to show an example of cooperation with other devotees and show an example of how to honor others, just like the six Goswamis, Krishnat Kirtana Gana Gana Tano Premamritam Bonidhi Dira Dira Janak Priyo Priyakaro Nirmatsaro Pujito, that the six Goswamis, they were not envious. They didn't think, oh, here is a brahmachari, here is a grihasta, here is a dira, a sober, a saintly person, here's a adira, a ruffian. Oh, they were happy to see everyone chanting Hare Krishna because they weren't envious of anyone. They knew that everyone is Krishna's eternal servant and everyone is by destiny supposed to go back to the spiritual world and be with Krishna again. And when we go back to the spiritual world, everyone is on the same platform of loving service to Krishna. Therefore, they didn't see people simply on the temporary designations. They saw them as potential eternal servants of Krishna. And they engaged everyone, whoever they were. Similarly, those who can teach us how to see anyone with the eyes of service, the eyes of love, whoever would, and appropriately be able to inspire them gradually to take up the process of devotional service, and by doing so, gradually become free from sinful activities. We can learn from them. We can appreciate. We don't have to appreciate everything that a devotee does or everything a devotee says, but the devotee is more advanced than we are in appreciating others, devotees on different levels. And if that devotee is fixed in trying to spread Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement even more than we are, certainly we can appreciate that and learn from them how we can become more steady in our vision, more loving and steady in our service, and make spiritual advancement. But the ultimate criteria of what will help us and what will not help us is Srila Prabhupada's books, instructions, and example. that at least theoretically, we've drawn this movement with the idea of accepting Prabhupada as the perfect example. Now, as I've said before, there are certain literatures describing Srila Prabhupada, sometimes not necessarily purposely, but due to the fact that anyone, as Prabhupada writes in the Nectar of Instruction, then anyone who's not an Uttamadhikari, they cannot really perceive who else is who is actually an Uttamadhikari. As it says in English, it takes one to know one. Only a Madhyamadhikari has some discrimination. They can see through the eyes of knowledge, at least, who's on what level of pure devotional service. Therefore, we may not perfectly see Srila Prabhupada as a perfect representative of Krishna. For instance, sometimes Prabhupada made statements about women. He made statements about blacks. He made different statements according to time, place, and circumstance. He made statements about everyone. Anyone who wasn't a pure devotee, Prabhupada made statements about. He didn't limit it to any particular section of people. But it wasn't his statements. As he used to say, I'm calling people a rascal. But actually, I'm not calling anyone a rascal. As Krishna, he's calling them a rascal. I'm simply repeating Krishna's message. Therefore, we have to understand that Prabhupada had no personal animosity towards anyone. He loved everyone equally. But in order to give us proper discrimination, Prabhupada sometimes pointed out the faults of materialists. And everyone materialists, it doesn't matter what body they're in, from Brahma down to the meanest insect, they all have difficulties in this material world. They're all suffering from karma. Therefore, to take one statement of Prabhupada and think that he was envious of another class of people in this world is quite misleading. Just like Prabhupada made statements about women sometimes, and sometimes they're misunderstood. But if you find out from Prabhupada's servants and those who had association with Prabhupada, Prabhupada was equally, and it's sometimes even more affectionate towards the ladies than he was towards the men. But that does not mean that, and also Prabhupada made statements about the inability of men to properly perform their responsibilities that lead to chaos in society. So Prabhupada never put the problems in any one corner. The whole problem was forgetfulness of Krishna and forgetfulness of our duty towards Krishna, which is also manifested in this material world in various ways. Therefore, with eyes of trying to understand what who Prabhupada is and what he's
Maharaj,
telling.
I'm so sorry, but please humbly remember that you are getting translated simultaneously. Please,
Okay,
Maharaj, slow down.
Okay. So with eyes, trying to see who Prabhupada actually is, at least with an open mind, and try to understand what kind of example Srila Prabhupada is exhibiting in different circumstances, so that we don't get into the idea that Prabhupada was just an ordinary person sometimes, and sometimes he was an extraordinary person at other times. Prabhupada was never an illusion. Prabhupada was always transcendental. And therefore, we can judge everyone, even our own initiating guru, because generally we don't judge our initiating guru. We have enough other people to judge. You don't have to worry if you don't judge your initiating guru, someone else will do it for you. So we have to not see how to appreciate Prabhupada, not blindly, but by assimilating what he was doing. That according to those audience that he was preaching to, according to the time and circumstance, was he trying to give them Krishna or not? generally speaking, when we're preaching, as Prabhupada said, the perfection, when they asked Prabhupada on a morning walk, Satsrup Maharaj and Jayadvaita Swami asked Prabhupada that sometimes we find that the Acharya has forgotten some verses, or sometimes it's found that he seems to make a mistake. How should we understand that? So Prabhupada said, the Acharya is not God. It's not that everything he does, he knows past, present, future like God does. But his perfection is how he's trying to spread Krishna consciousness. And for a perfect devotee like Srila Prabhupada, Krishna gave him perfect intelligence how to do it. One time, one reporter was asking Srila Prabhupada, how do you choose who's going to be an authority within ISKCON? And one devotee said, Krishna gives him intelligence. And Prabhupada said, no, Krishna directly tells me. Now, we may wonder that if Prabhupada was told by Krishna that this person should be an authority or this activity should go on. So how is it possible that anything could go wrong? After all, Krishna knows past, present, future. So if we had so many difficulties in our society so far, did Prabhupada make any mistakes? No, it's not a mistake. To give someone who's not perfect an opportunity to become perfect, it's not a mistake. That if Prabhupada didn't appoint devotees as GBCs, he didn't establish temples and farms and gurukuls. Now, his instructions may have been perfect, but the persons that he obviously gave authority to in these areas may not have been perfect. But if they followed his instructions, they'd become perfect. So Prabhupada gave everyone who was willing an opportunity to become perfect. But if they didn't become perfect, that's not Prabhupada's fault. It means that they haven't properly utilized the gift that was given them. So similarly, Krishna is making arrangements for all of us. He's putting us in different services. He's giving us different amounts of understanding. And if we sincerely use it, then Krishna will help us advance. It doesn't really matter what anyone else is doing. I mean, it may matter in some respects. But if we take shelter of Prabhupada, his instructions, and we take shelter of those who are following his instructions, because it's not that we're only taking shelter of Prabhupada. Prabhupada is also surrounded by his followers, by his associates. And if we serve and appreciate Srila Prabhupada and love him, Krishna and the Acharyas are pleased. So Prabhupada, he's pleased if we associate and serve those who are associates, those who are trying to become perfect in Krishna consciousness, or perhaps those who are already perfect, but are serving Srila Prabhupada in some respect. That if we become the servant of the servant of the servants of Krishna, then we're actually following the instructions of the Acharya and the example of the Acharya. So as Prabhupada writes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's no room for envy in our society. Our society is not meant to become envious. It's meant to become a servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. And anyone can help us to do that, beginning with Srila Prabhupada and anyone else's example we see in that direction, we should see as a manifestation of Prabhupada's mercy, that Prabhupada is actually present before us by his instructions through those devotees, because they're manifesting Krishna's potency by serving the instructions coming in disciple succession. And we also have to become manifestations of that mercy. And if we try sincerely, then as we become more and more perfect, then we'll be able to appreciate and see everyone as Krishna's eternal servant. And at that point, we can actually enter into pure, unalloyed devotional service in all circumstances. and therefore gradually always remember, see Krishna everywhere and everyone. So the conclusion is, Prabhupada's instructions, we at least theoretically, we have to take as perfect. His example we have to take as perfect. If we don't see it as perfect, then we have to get some explanation for those who do see it as perfect, at least reasonable explanation. We don't blindly follow, but we may need some explanation to increase our faith in Srila Prabhupada and his instructions. And then we should also develop faith in the other devotees and see them appropriately, to how much they're engaged in devotional service, to what degree they're understood the science of devotional service, and what degree they're fixed in that service of devotional service in Krishna consciousness, and serve them appropriately. Then Krishna will help us. He'll give us more and more revelations, more and more understanding, and gradually we'll develop love for Krishna, we'll develop love for Krishna's devotees, we'll be able to be effective in helping the innocent, and we'll be able to lose our taste for those things which draw our mind away from Krishna. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions? Comments?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
I'll be right back. 1 second.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Maharaj, this is a question from Nadia Devidasi. It's in the Zoom chat. It's in Russian. So I will translate for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So how do we respect initiating gurus that are telling their disciples that they have to follow their prescribed duty and have to go and fight against the Ukrainian? I don't understand. How can I keep respect in such circumstances? Dear Gurudev, please reply to this question.
Well, from one angle, of course, when you put in the word Ukrainians, it's a different thing. It invokes another sentiment, because we know a lot of devotees who are Ukrainians, and it also applies that they're going to fight against them. So that obviously invokes a certain emotion. From the time, place, and circumstance, one would have to consider what their instruction actually is, whether they're telling them trying to make them enthusiastic to do it, or they should follow their duty. For instance, during the Vietnamese War, there was a big anti-war movement going on. And often Prabhupada would get a question whether they should go and fight. Now, of course, when Prabhupada was dealing with ordinary people, because, for instance, when Prabhupada was in the Bowery, his audience were not devotees. They weren't even necessarily aspiring devotees. They were just ordinary personalities who were, we could say, coming to hear about Krishna. And therefore, when they complained to Prabhupada about being drafted, Prabhupada, at least on occasion, would tell them that it's their duty to go and fight. Of course, this was contrary to the mood of his audience in some respects, because many of them were against the war that was going on. Now, later on, when some devotees came to the movement and actually began to take Krishna consciousness seriously, Prabhupada encouraged them to, if possible, to try to avoid the draft. As one draft agent came to our temple and saw the devotees trying to ascertain whether or not they should be eligible to be drafted into the army, they examined the devotees' lifestyle and they found that it was more austere than the army. So they realized that anyone who had become a devotee didn't do so or to necessarily just to avoid the draft, but it was actually more austere than the army. So they gave exemptions. And sometimes devotees did things that were rather unusual, and therefore they got exemptions. Now, in other parts of the world, under these circumstances, what the consequences are of not joining the army, that, that's according to time, place, and circumstance. I don't know exactly what the exact instructions are of others in terms of this particular issue, but probably it's necessary in order to get a more clear understanding to inquire from them on what basis they're giving these instructions. And if we're not satisfied with it, that it's actually appropriate, at least we should respect these devotees within our mind, because we may not be able to see from their point of view, and we may not even accept their instructions as valid, but we're not also the super soul, and we also don't want to interfere with other people's relationships. That it's up to them, or to their spiritual Diksha Guru or Shiksha Guru. It's up to them to accept it or not. Everything is based, as I said, on Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, and ultimately we have to, the super soul within our heart has to give us intelligence how to understand things properly. Now, if someone else doesn't understand things properly, whoever they might be, it's not that we have to lose complete faith in them, especially if they're more advanced than we are in practice of devotional service, sadhana bhakti, or in preaching, or in spreading Krishna consciousness. We may lose faith in that particular aspect of their instruction, but then again, we're not obliged to follow their instruction anyhow.
Сейчас. Maharaj, I can't, I physically can't. Could you please slow down, please?
Okay. What are we up to in terms of, do I have to repeat anything? Should I repeat
No, it's
it?
fine. It's just the last part, please. Last part.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry, I'm sorry, actually. So we don't have to follow their instructions. We're not obliged to follow the instructions, nor are we obliged to start criticizing them. What is the value of such a speculation? How is that developing our bhakti? Are these devotees telling people to forget Krishna, to worship the devil or something? they may be doing what they understand to be the best under those circumstances, and we may disagree with them. But we should become envious of them and neglect whatever service they're doing and negate it all because we don't agree with one instruction they're given. Instead, we should try to understand, and we're not obliged to accept those instructions, nor are we obliged to reject the devotee who's giving them. Nor are we obliged to get into these controversies, especially if they only produce an animosity between the devotees and confusion and enviousness. That will simply destroy our bhakti, that's all. It has no value. So respect within our minds, and then find devotees that we can cooperate with it and learn from the devotees of superior how to appreciate everyone's devotional service appropriately. Then our devotional service will grow. Does that make sense? That's Nadia. Who asked the question?
Mataji Nadia, your disciple from Moscow.
Yes. Did that answer her question?
Yes, she answered you in Zoom chat.
Okay.
Maharaj, she said it's very, very clear for her now.
Good. Thank you. Any other questions?
Да, у меня. Можно, Гуру Махарадж? В контексте вашего ответа, если можно, простите, пожалуйста. Вот вы сказали, нужно перестать их критиковать. Может, им просто перестать нужно на эту тему высказываться, и тогда не будет повода для критики, если они некомпетентны в каких-то вопросах. Потому что, например, в этом чате есть
Сейчас
ученики...
Агнихотра Прабhu, первую часть, потом вторую, okay? So, Maharaj, Agnihotra Prabhu said you told us to stop criticizing them. So, if we're not criticizing them, that maybe they should stop just saying anything about this topic, which they are incompetent to speak about.
Yes, you can tell them that, but are they going to listen to you?
Они не слышат, они не слушают.
I mean, we have to see we're not necessarily the guru of every living entity on this planet. And even if we were, Prabhupada didn't necessarily tell everyone everything he thought. We shouldn't waste our time. We have to see who's actually accepting us as an authority and then explain to them appropriately, because they'll listen. Others, we should respect, but we shouldn't try to act artificially as their authority. When we get very emotional about something and we're convinced we're 100% right, then our ability to see reality usually diminishes quite greatly. And therefore we can't see the subtleties of things. So better to be humble and to see whether if we find something's wrong and we have a desire to correct it, pray to Krishna for the appropriate intelligence, how to help the situation. And we may not be able to do it in the way we emotionally think we should do it, especially directly confronting those who are our superiors and tell them exactly what we think, as if they should immediately surrender to us because they've become our disciples. On the other hand, if we see something wrong, we should pray to Krishna if we can help, that's all. The whole world is going to the darkest regions of existence. Why should we participate in that endeavor? We should become Krishna's devotees and try and spread love. As I said originally, plenty of people will criticize, plenty of people will be envious, plenty of people will create animosity and dissension in our society. But we should try to be an instrument for Krishna to distribute bhakti. Whereas Prabhupada once wrote to me, if you light a match in a dark room, the darkness can't put the match out. So we're actually displaying some qualities, divine qualities. Some people will recognize them and take advantage of them. Now, as I said, we don't accept everything as right, but we don't accept anything as black, completely black and white. So that we can act appropriately to help. Without the proper discrimination, we can't help. We see everything as divine, and we have no opportunities to make things divine. And if we see everything as material, then won't have any opportunity to make anything divine either. So we have to have proper discrimination and humbly pray. And for the intelligence, and when Krishna gives us the intelligence, if he does, then we'll know what to do to help the situation. Other than that, we should just go on with our own service and try to help become Krishna conscious and spread Krishna consciousness too. Anything else? We'll stop there. Thank you very much. Grandhara Srimad Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande Haribo.
Haribo.